2025 was supposed to be the year that we would find out everything about the Jeffrey Epstein case.
We need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
The public has a right to know. Americans have a right to know.
But instead, the Trump administration now says there's no Epstein client list, there was no blackmail, and no more evidence can be released to the public. They've supercharged speculation and angered their own supporters.
The explanations here are just absurd.
And at the heart of it all are the Epstein Files. In July, the Department of Justice said their review was done. Nothing more to see. But we don't think the DOJ's account of the Epstein Files fully adds up. We've trawled through material relating to Epstein's crimes, hundreds of court documents and previous disclosures. The DOJ said its review included 300 gigabytes of evidence. But our analysis asked if the true scale of the Epstein Files is much, much larger and actually runs to terabytes, still unreleased to the public. And in a scandal plagued by claims of intelligence and blackmail, we've identified sophisticated surveillance equipment that can be linked to multiple cameras and accessed remotely. We'll hear from forensic and legal experts about what we've found.
300 gigabytes is not anywhere close to encompassing all of the digital evidence in this case.
And look at how Trump's administration is dealing with the fallout of breathing new life into the Epstein mystery.
This is why members of the public don't trust the government. They think there's a cover-up.
First, let's remind ourselves of why Trump and his government is facing endless headlines about Jeffrey Epstein. Questions over Epstein have obsessed the MAGA movement for years.
You are on the right side of history.
Before they were elected, leading figures now working in Trump's government said the files needed to be released.
There are a lot of people who are knee-deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth.
Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are.
We need to release the Epstein list.
And even Trump said he'd have no problem with it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Then, once they got into power, Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, frequently teased the release of more Epstein evidence.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. You're going to see some Epstein information being released.
Literally the day after that interview, the moment arrived. The release of the Epstein Files, Phase 1. Conservative commentators and social media stars stood triumphantly outside the White House, holding up binders of evidence. But actually, the day of the big reveal turned out to be a big disappointment. Most of the 200 pages declassified were already available to the public. It was not what the MAGA world was promised.
There's effectively nothing new in the binders.
These are stuff that we've known for 3 years.
This came out and it was a nothing burger. I am really pissed.
Facing a backlash, Bondi quickly released a statement saying that she was told by an anonymous FBI source that thousands of pages of documents were secretly withheld from her office, and so she ordered the FBI to release them. And again, Bondi promised transparency.
Friday at 8, a truckload of evidence arrived. It's now in the possession of the FBI. We're going to go through it as fast as we can. It's a new administration, and everything's going to come out to the public. The public has a right to know. Americans have a right to know.
And so, after months of examining all the evidence, did we finally find out what was in those files? Not quite. On July the 8th, the DOJ and the FBI released a memo that said there was no client list, no evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals, that no third parties would be investigated, and that Epstein's death was suicide. And as for that truckload of evidence, well, after conducting a, quote, exhaustive review, the DOJ and FBI said they had found over 10,000 downloaded videos and images of illegal child sex abuse material and other pornography, and they would not permit the release of child pornography. Speaking at the White House the next day, the Attorney General was clear on what that meant.
Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day.
This immediately raised the eyebrows of many, including Nima Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor.
I can't believe that all the evidence, whether it's pictures or videos, constitutes child pornography. There has to be some non-pornography evidence that can be made public to the American people.
The message was clear from the Trump administration. Nothing more to see here. We don't agree. Let's start with a number, 300 gigabytes of data. The DOJ offered just a single sentence about what they reviewed in the July memo. A significant amount of material, including more than 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence. Back in the early 2000s, when the Epstein investigations were starting, that would have been the space of one decent-sized hard drive on your average home computer. But Jeffrey Epstein didn't run an average home. In fact, there's a lot to suggest he was obsessed with data and storing evidence. Pictures of FBI seizures at Epstein's homes show piles of CDs, hard drives, and a number of computers. And the files the Department of Justice released in February give us a clearer idea of just how much digital storage he had. This evidence list from Phase 1 in February details dozens of hard disks, computers, iPads, thumb drives, and network servers. It's packed with digital devices. Some are listed with their storage capacity, with others we use model and serial numbers to work it out. Adding together the capacity of only the devices where we can be certain of their size, our analysis shows the total comes to more than 24 terabytes. Now, obviously some of the devices may have been empty or only partially filled, but the contrast between the July memo and the February evidence list is striking. The 300 gigabytes specifically mentioned in the July memo would represent a tiny fraction of those potential 24 terabytes, just over 1% of the total data capacity laid out by the DOJ in February. And we know there's a huge amount of evidence out there. During Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, her lawyer complained to the judge about how Maxwell was having to review terabytes of evidence on inadequate prison computers while waiting for trial. Evidence included approximately 214,000 photographs, hundreds of hours of audio-visual files, 2.4 million pages of material, 20,000 pages of interview notes, and reports and other materials related to 226 separate witnesses. That's terabytes of evidence being discussed in black and white between a judge and Maxwell's lawyer in a case the Department of Justice was prosecuting in 2021. But now, the DOJ is telling the world that it's providing maximum information to the public, but only refers to evidence including more than 300 gigabytes. We spoke to Stacey Eldridge, a former FBI senior forensic examiner, about what we found.
Are they saying they were only going to produce 300 gigabytes of discovery? Did they think there were only 300 gigabytes of data that was relevant to this case that they were going to use in trial? It's really vague.
The government is being less than genuine when they said that there's only 300 gigabytes of data. We know from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial that there were terabytes of discovery that were produced in that case.
The DOJ's conclusion to their exhaustive review needs a closer look too. Their aim was to release as much as possible while protecting victims and respecting the evidence that's been sealed by courts. In the end, they decided that no further disclosure was appropriate or warranted. But is it feasible that within potentially terabytes of information, the hundreds of thousands of documents, photos, videos, emails, and messages, that there was nothing that warranted release? Because just a quick look at the evidence list from February raises questions about the DOJ's conclusion. The list mentions photos of Epstein's private island, like these ones. They were previously released in open court. And what about this poster? Clear evidence of how Epstein operated. It was previously found on an electronic device and released in court. If files like these were on one of the data devices the DOJ said they had back in February, why not release them now? And as rumors that Jeffrey Epstein was working with intelligence agencies continue to swell, we know he had an Austrian passport with a fake name, which was used to enter Saudi Arabia and the UK, which was found in a locked safe alongside $70,000 in cash and 48 loose diamonds. Does none of this require the release of any more evidence or warrant further investigation?
The most helpful evidence would be the FBI interview notes, as well as any video evidence. Video doesn't lie. It can show that who else was at Epstein's Island when the accusers claim that they were sexually abused. There has to be a treasure trove of information that the Department of Justice has access to that they're not making public.
And there's one particular area of speculation about Epstein that has persisted for years.
You think this freak show of Epstein wasn't like, it didn't have hidden cameras or wasn't taped and
Were there hidden cameras at literally every property?
Who has the tapes?
Look at these images obtained by the New York Times. They were taken in Epstein's Upper East Side Manhattan apartment. They show cameras in one bedroom and an adjoining room. And after the Palm Beach Police Department first investigated Epstein in 2005, a report for the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility says the police knew that Epstein had surveillance cameras stationed in and around his home, which potentially captured video evidence of people visiting his residence. Victims of Epstein have long claimed his properties were covered by cameras.
He showed you cameras throughout the house.
The main thing he did when I walked in, I thought was interesting, he showed me where the men monitoring everything were. I looked on the cameras and I saw toilet, bed, toilet, bed. It was very obvious that they were like monitoring private moments.
And it's clear from looking at the DOJ's evidence list from February that sophisticated security camera gear was found on Epstein's properties. It reveals seized CCTV and surveillance equipment capable of recording banks of cameras and storing terabytes of data, including a Unify MVR, or network video recorder. That's a small server that stores and manages video from up to 20 cameras. Additional hardware could have made it possible to access the clips and save them remotely. Another system, wrongly spelled as Cube, appears to be a Secure 9000 site server. It's marketed for use as a security system for schools, healthcare centres or small businesses, designed to help monitor access and can be used with video systems. We know nothing about exactly what, if any, data investigators retrieved from the surveillance systems. Another glimpse at potential evidence before the shutters came down.
When you're talking about dozens and dozens of electronic devices seized from Jeffrey Epstein, it has to be video, most likely, or thousands and thousands of pictures. Why haven't those pictures been produced?
I think there's a lot of evidence that, these files, such as they are, there's a lot of material that could be released. Just recently in the United States, as part of a sort of distraction from the Epstein files, the Trump administration is releasing all of these FBI files about the investigation into Trump's connection with Russia. And I'll tell you, they've managed to redact a lot. So the idea that suddenly they can't redact things, in this case, I think is a little suspect.
The one piece of new evidence the DOJ did release in July wasn't even related to Epstein's crimes, but to his death. Hours of what was described as raw CCTV footage captured in Jeffrey Epstein's prison blog on the day he was found dead in his cell. But analysis by experts and other media outlets quickly pointed out issues with the footage, like a missing minute the DOJ said was the result of a nightly reset.
The first shocker was, the midnight reboot, and then people said, oh, we've found a minute missing, and then it was kind of up to 2.5 minutes, and then maybe 3 minutes. And then, as other people pointed out, you can see like the mouse moving. So it's certainly not a raw video by any means.
Even things like the video from Jeffrey Epstein's jail the night he died, that was ostensibly supposed to prove he killed himself. Well, CBS News did a analysis of it, and they said this doesn't really prove anything. You can see people sneaking up to the block of jail cells out of view of the camera, things like this. So there are so many unanswered questions here.
If Trump's Department of Justice hoped its July memo would finally put to rest the conspiracy theories and speculation around the crimes and death of Jeffrey Epstein, then between the edited prison footage, potentially missing terabytes of data, and no further release of evidence, what it actually achieved was to breathe more life into the Epstein Files mystery.
Whether it's Bondi or Patel or other high-level folks at the DOJ, they've been saying something for years, again, before they were in these positions. And now that they're at DOJ, this is why people think that there's a deep state and there's this conspiracy to protect the rich and powerful in America.
I think this is the biggest problem Trump has faced, with his base potentially ever.
It's a problem of their own making, which the world's most powerful man and his administration are desperate to move on from.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
I call it the Epstein hoax.
Total bullshit. Okay?
But what the president can't move on from is the fact that he and Epstein knew each other for years. It's believed the two men first became friends in the late 1980s or early 90s, knowing each other from parties on the Palm Beach and New York social circuits. In an interview with New York Magazine in 2002, Trump described Epstein as a terrific guy. And just 2 years before he died, Epstein told the journalist Michael Wolff that he was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years. More recently, Trump has been keen to distance himself from the disgraced Epstein. The president claims they fell out years ago and hadn't spoken in more than a decade before Epstein's death.
I was not a fan of his, that I can tell you.
Trump has denied any wrongdoing, and he's never been accused by law enforcement of involvement in Epstein's crimes. But the desire to make the story go away has only fueled more speculation, including from Democratic House leader Hakeem Jeffries.
What, if anything, is the Trump administration and the Department of Justice hiding? Option 1, they lied for years. Option 2, they're engaging in a cover-up. At this point, it seems reasonable that can only be one of the two things.
I think this is a big problem for Donald Trump. And I'm not accusing him of any wrongdoing, but there is this perception that the reason the documents aren't being produced is because he's somehow implicated in them. If I were advising the president, I would strongly encourage him to make the documents public, like he said during his presidential campaign, like his cabinet level officials have said they would do, to really clear this cloud of mistrust when it comes to the Jeffrey Epstein files.
If the July memo was supposed to be a victory of transparency, the DOJ's handling of it all has only added to that cloud of mistrust and angered some of Trump's biggest supporters.
There's so much to unpack. The explanations here are just absurd.
Because here's my stance on this. The whole thing should be released.
She has created an embarrassment and also a PR crisis for the President of the United States.
I blame Pam Bondi.
The White House is now clearly trying to win back the angry MAGA crowd. First, by going to someone who knows more than anyone about Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell was his former girlfriend and accomplice, and she's serving 20 years for recruiting and trafficking teenage girls for sexual abuse by Epstein. After the backlash to July's memo, Pam Bondi announced that her deputy would speak to Maxwell. That interview took place over 2 days for 9 hours.
She answered those questions honestly, truthfully, to the best of her ability. She never invoked a privilege. She never refused to answer a question.
The Department of Justice said they'd share details of those conversations at the appropriate time, but that time still hasn't arrived, leaving the door open to speculation about what Maxwell has told the administration. Speculation that was supercharged when, just a few days after her interview, Maxwell was given a transfer to a minimum security prison camp in Texas, with fewer inmates and granted work release. And it was reported that Maxwell had said nothing in her interview that would be harmful to the president, all while her legal team pushes for a pardon that Trump hasn't ruled out.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon.
And if all that wasn't enough fuel for the conspiracy theory fire,
good morning. Do you have anything to say today?
The person who interviewed Maxwell in prison, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Just last year, he was working as Donald Trump's personal lawyer.
So there's obviously a conflict of interest there. He's meeting with Ghislaine. So one wonders what kind of messages are being relayed back and forth.
This case has been mishandled both in terms of the legal process, public relations, but also politically. There is the perception that high-level political officials, both in this administration and previous administrations, rub shoulders with Jeffrey Epstein.
There's little sign that the Epstein story is going away, even if the White House wants it to, because now Congress is involved. The House Oversight Committee has voted to subpoena the Justice Department for its files on Epstein, with even some Republicans joining the Democrats in demanding those documents. And the first of those files are going to be given to the committee on the 22nd of August. They've also called on a number of high-profile political figures to testify. Former President Bill Clinton, a repeat flyer on Epstein's plane, as well as his wife, Senator Hillary Clinton, have both been subpoenaed. The question is, will any of these actions be enough to make the story go away?
I don't think the Jeffrey Epstein case is going to go away anytime soon.
A lot of these questions probably won't be answered, at least for decades. Maybe this is a JFK assassination situation where, everyone involved has to be dead before we'll find out the truth.
Now, we put all of our findings to the Department of Justice and asked them to respond, but they didn't get back to us. They promised they'd reveal something new, but people are still demanding the release of the files. They promised transparency, but we've shown that what they've provided this year is conflicting and confusing information, mismatch of data and promises. This could roll on for months, maybe years more, with no guarantees that any of the questions being asked by Trump's critics, government skeptics, and most importantly, Epstein's victims, will ever be answered.